to What's Your Edge, a series of Vision Edge marketing podcasts dedicated to helping you use data, analytics, process, and measurement to create a competitive edge for you and a superior experience for your customers. I'm your host, Laura Patterson, President of Vision Edge Marketing. In this episode, we're joined by Stacie Feller, President of Kanga Roof. Stacie's journey is a powerful illustration of how the absence or presence of customer data can dramatically impact business decisions. We're going to go behind the scenes to explore how a lack of customer insights created some missed opportunities and how a renewed focus on data has since transformed her decision-making. Today's conversation takes us from instinct to insight and ultimately to impact by exploring how data transforms business decisions into measurable growth. Welcome, Stacie.
Thank you. Thank you. Excited to be here.
Glad to have you here. So, Stacie, I want to wind the clock back a little
to
the pandemic. At the outset of the pandemic, which, thank goodness we're on the other side of that, but uncertainty was the order of the day. And I'm sure, like many leaders, you and your team anticipated a sharp decline in business. Yet, you told me that the reality was actually the opposite. Instead, you experienced a surge in demand for roofing services. And despite the unexpected opportunity, Kanga Roof was unable to to fully capitalize on it. So one reason, the supply chain faltered and your organization was caught off guard. This wasn't really a simple story of external disruption, but a wake-up call for the importance of customer data. And by the way, this scenario is not unique. According to Forrester, insights-driven businesses are growing at more than 30% annually, far outpacing their peers. So being able to capture data and act on it is critical. What is the big difference? These organizations don't rely on gut instinct. They invest in data-driven decision-making. So let's start at that critical moment.
Okay.
What were the early signs that your assumptions about customer demand might be off? And how did you recognize that the root issue was a lack of actionable customer data?
Yeah, well, during the early days of the pandemic, I remember being here in my office with my husband. My husband and I share an office, watching the news, and talking about what's going to happen. There was so much uncertainty. We assumed, like so many others, that really business would almost come to a screeching halt simply from the uncertainty. And what we found was that it was actually just the opposite in our industry. We were considered part of the essential workers, so we were able to stay out and stay working because we're in the trades and the home services businesses. And but we continued to get phone calls. And our phone didn't stop ringing. And I can remember conversations we had about, where is this coming from? This is so much not what we're seeing in the news. And why are we different? What's going on here? And the more that we looked into it, we realized that homeowners were now home. And so, whereas before, a lot of our calls, we would be scheduling, people would want to meet in the evenings or on Saturdays, but now people were home during the day working from home. And so they started noticing issues with their roof that they hadn't noticed before, or leaks inside their house that they hadn't noticed before. And with the stimulus money that was coming through, and people weren't traveling anymore, so they had travel money that they were using that to actually improve their homes as opposed to doing those other things. So the problem for us was that we didn't have good data on who our customers really were and how they found us, what services they needed, and so their priorities were shifting. And we were reacting at the time instead of being prepared for it. So that's when I kind of realized, hey, we need to do a little bit better at tracking our data so that we can use it quicker to make decisions instead of having to react.
It's amazing, how something like that event, and it can be any kind of an event, that was certainly an unusual and hopefully never to happen again event in our lifetime. But, unexpected events can certainly impact businesses and do every day. What you described is something we see across many organizations, though, decisions made from instinct or urgency rather than insight. We often call these random acts, whether that's random acts of marketing or random acts of planning, random acts of selling or even random acts of customer engagement. They feel productive in the moment, but they often lead to inefficiencies or missed opportunities. So once you recognize that pattern, what steps did you take to move from these random acts to more deliberate, insight-driven actions?
Well, I knew that we had to be intentional. My background was actually in the industry, in the insurance industry. So I spent 20 years in the insurance carrier side. And so we had a tremendous amount of data. We had actuaries on staff that worked with us. And that's not really the case in the home services, or especially in the roofing market, of having data be so important. And so I knew that I had to kind of train my staff to be a little bit more intentional with data. So we started by documenting customer touch points, how they heard about us, what problems they were trying to solve, what factors drove their buying decisions. And now this is not something we were able to get all at one time. We're still collecting this over a lot of time. And we started implementing tools in our CRM to be able to track trends in our lead sources and service types and kind of that timing. So that way, instead of reacting to what we thought was happening, we could start making some decisions based on what the data kind of led us to believe. And it wasn't just marketing; it was, operations and staffing. For example, we've now trained our appointment coordinators that are on the phone talking to customers to gather data that help them determine who's the best roofing advisor to send them out. Whereas before, it was kind of a gut feel for who do you think would fit with this customer well. Now we actually kind of looked at it and said, you know what? This roofing advisor does much better with these type of customers and have a better success rate. So let's kind of try to figure out who that customer type is and match them better with our roofing advisors.
That's a really good example. Thank you. And
Mm-hmm.
I think I mentioned to you, I too started my career in the insurance industry. Well, that's a conversation for another day.
Yeah.
But you're right. There's tremendous amount of data there.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
unlike what many other companies have, and other industries have. So your experience really highlights a common pitfall, though, and that is acting on assumptions rather than evidence. And as you reflect, what was the impact of not having real-time customer insights during that period?
Mm-hmm.
And what decisions do you wish you could have made if you'd had better data?
Well, not having that data and really going off of kind of gut feel and assumptions, which is what we had done for a lot of time, we weren't able to predict any the demand surges that we should have been able to see early. When we started seeing people stay at home and we started seeing our phones still ringing, I should have seen that quicker. But in addition to that, we were short on materials when business spiked because I wasn't paying as much attention to what manufacturers were doing. And the manufacturers were thinking we were going to be going into this recession. So they didn't stock up on a lot of materials and they didn't fill their yards up because they didn't want to be sitting on inventory. And I don't blame them for that. But what happened was I didn't piece together, oh my gosh, the phone's still ringing. We're still busy. They don't have materials to provide us. And so I should have made adjustments in my pricing at that time. I should have seen about buying bulk at that time. So it probably mostly cost me in profitability because I didn't adjust pricing at that time and I didn't, again, buy bulk materials at the time. We didn't prioritize the right jobs, the more profitable jobs at that time. So, kind of every delay in that, it really cost my bottom line, is what I figure at that time.
Yeah, I think what you're pointing out a really important point, that data it has ripples into every facet of the business and has
Yeah.
impact on every decision
Hmm.
leaders have to make. And you're pointing that out. Now, it doesn't matter whether it's 5 years ago or today, that is still true,
Yep.
regardless of the situation. So, organizations, they know they need better insights, but they really struggle to know where to start.
Hmm.
We have found it's really helpful to have a practical framework that you can use to move from intuition and experience to something that is more evidence based. And that's why we developed something we call the 8 steps for applying
Yeah.
business data derived insights, which I hope people will have a moment, take a moment and read, because it's an approach that transforms data into a disciplined decision making process, which is what you're describing. And the
Hmm.
framework, it offers a systematic way to recognize, validate, and apply insights from quantitative as well as qualitative data, because that's one of the things you were thinking about when you were talking about that match between the roof
Hmm.
advisor and the customer. It may be
Hmm.
not so quantitative, but it was qualitative data that helped you make a better match.
Hmm.
And that emphasizes that, data-derived insights when leveraged through a disciplined process, enables a more objective, scalable, and predictive decision-making, which leads to what you were talking about, a better bottom line,
Yep.
above market growth, significant, EBITDA gains, somewhere, between 15 and 25% is what we've seen
Mhm.
for companies who leverage data in a disciplined
Yeah.
way. So Stacie, here you are. You've come a long way in 5 years, and I know you've had tremendous growth. And we are all so glad in Austin that we have you and your company. So I know you've been here a long time, raised a
Mhm.
family here. So it's not like you just came on the scene. So you're a valuable member of our community, you and your company. But if you're going to give some advice, and we're going to get into advice, but before that, maybe kind of walk us through the first steps you took in building a more robust customer data foundation. And what did you focus on most, like capturing customer feedback or transaction data or market trends or something else?
Yeah, well, the first thing is I had to really organize the data we had. Let's just see what we got to start with. And so I started pulling customer information, from the estimates and service calls, the follow ups, into our CRM system so that we could see patterns. We could kind of see what was going on. And then we started collecting feedback on each job and then like tracking reviews to understand what customers really wanted. We also started looking at things like I started looking at kind of like at lead times and call volumes and job profitability, but it wasn't just collecting the data. It was I knew I had to use it to make better business decisions. So what I wanted to do is make sure that I had the data that was needed for my business decisions. So the biggest thing was just making sure that everybody put everything in the system. That's the biggest thing that if I can give any advice is get it in the system. And I know not everybody, people especially, aren't the best at wanting to document everything in the system, but it is so much needed. And so kind of that's where it's just start with organizing what you already have, and then you start adding the small pieces that you can get your hands on and get your staff to get into the system to be able to use.
I think that's a really good piece of advice. And there's a
Mhm.
lot more data than people realize at their fingertips. We
Mhm.
have this conversation a lot with people, well, we don't really have very much data, but there is tremendous amount of
Mhm.
treasured data, just gems sitting in all kinds of systems, just disparate systems. And you haven't really taken a chance maybe to organize it to your point and in a way that can help you look at what, as you were describing those patterns.
And
We were talking of,
if I
go
could
ahead.
add something, and it doesn't have to be a fancy CRM either.
Right.
I mean, what I started with, and one of the ones I still use a lot is I have an Excel workbook that is simply it's I call it my historical data workbook, and I've got tabs for every year, and I've got a roll up tab, and I can look at it and I can see kind of what's happened over some time in different segments of the business.
What will we do without Excel? I am with you right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. So it doesn't have to be a fancy
Right.
system that you bought. Just stick it in Excel and start somewhere.
And now that we have handy dandy AI helpers, we can take that
Oh,
Excel
yes.
workbook. Okay, that's a
Yes, for
conversation
sure.
for another day. We'll have to put that one in the parking lot.
Yes.
But
Yes.
yes, now that we have that those helpers, we can really do some data crunching with our Excel workbooks.
Mhm.
So you were talking about the supply chain earlier, and so I know you're really familiar with the value of a supply
Mhm.
chain. But we talk about the fact that there's also a supply chain for insights, what we call the get this, the insight supply chain, which entails five critical stages:
Mhm.
plan, source, make, deliver, and return. And we recommend, mapping and continuously optimizing this insight supply chain so you can efficiently transform, vast amounts of data into some timely, relevant insights that you can then distribute across the business functions. Because one of the things you were talking about is you got to make a lot of decisions. They're not just marketing, they're not just sales,
Mhm.
they're affecting all different kinds of parts of your business. So you want to be able
Mhm.
to distribute those insights where they can
Yep.
have impact across the business. So proactive management of the process is pretty essential for maximizing customer value and sustaining a competitive advantage. And I
Yep.
know you're in a very competitive marketplace,
Mhm.
and also supporting long-term business success. So my question for you is, how do you ensure that your data collection and analysis processes, the ones you just described, keep
Mhm.
pace with how quickly customer needs evolve and how quickly market conditions change? And while you're thinking about that, what systems or routines have you put in place to keep your inside supply chain flowing and relevant? And what obstacles have you encountered that you can close the gaps in your data supply chain?
Well, first of all, I am, if you're familiar with the disc profile, I'm a high D. And
No,
so, yeah. And so,
me too.
and data is something that I just love. And so one of the things it is imperative for me to keep that data. I think that's part of one of my main jobs as the CEO of the company is to make sure that we're doing this. So one thing is that it is a high priority for me, for the leadership team. And so and it's something that is done on a regular monthly basis. And so it's not something that we just do once a year at planning or anything. We don't, it's monthly. I look at it and see what's going on. It's not a one time project. But I look at, reviews in our customers' behaviors and our operations and look for any kind of shift like one of the things that we look at a rise in like roof repairs versus replacements, and adapt things accordingly, marketing and staffing. When the economy is not great, kind of like what we're seeing right now, we see more people wanting to do repairs and they want to do a replacement. And so that's one of the things is I think is you've got to make it a priority as the leadership. If it's not a priority for the leadership, then your staff's not going to have it as a priority. But one of the obstacles, the first thing that came to mind that when you said the word obstacles to this, was kind of the accuracy of our data. I can remember in the earlier days when I really started focusing on this, meeting with our sales team several times over and talking about how imperative it was for them to keep their files updated. And of course, salespeople, they want to be out there talking. They don't want to be behind a computer. They don't. And so we even we entertained the idea of having somebody in the office just to update their stuff and just to make sure that we had good data because bad data led to bad decisions. So for give you an example, if our sales folks didn't keep the files updated with regard to what jobs we lost, then I would assume that if that job was still open, then I still had the potential to make that sale. Okay. So if let's say I have 100 jobs out there, but really 30 of them are dead. Customers have already said, we're not going to buy from you. Okay. Well, I look at it and I don't know that. Then I change my decision on how much marketing I do is going to change. And so I would tell the sales team all the time over again, when you don't update the system, I don't make decisions that impact how many leads I can give you. And so because I'm out there thinking, hey, we still have 100 customers when really we only have 70. And so that was a big obstacle was getting good, accurate data and getting everybody to put the right stuff in the system, so that I could make the right decisions. And it's still a struggle. I mean, anytime we bring new folks on, it is a struggle for us to keep doing that. So it's got to be part of everyone's responsibility. Everybody's got to be a part of it.
Yeah, for sure. And that's a great example
Hmm.
of why data quality and data accuracy is imperative. And I
Yeah.
love the fact that, you model the way, right?
Hmm.
And
Yep.
you understand accountability and owning making decisions. And that helps them understand, I'm assuming, knowing you
Mhm.
helps your people understand why it is important and how it's going to impact their work.
Yep.
So effective business planning and decision making, as I have mentioned a few times, and I know you agree, takes more than intuition. It really takes a disciplined approach to identifying trends and patterns, which you have talked about, both with internal and external data. And a lot of the data that you talked about earlier was really internal data. But by understanding and leveraging trends like general direction over time and patterns like
Hmm.
repeatable occurrences, like you were talking about earlier, organizations can anticipate customer needs and, to your point, allocate resources strategically. Like we
Yep.
don't have as many potential jobs in place as we thought we did, which will affect
Hmm.
inventory and how you allocate your people, and of course, future growth. So the real advantage comes from combining data, trends, and patterns together to inform forward-looking customer-centric business strategies.
Hmm.
So now that you have a stronger data foundation, how did your decision making evolve? And can you share like an example of some business decisions, whether it's staffing or marketing or operations, that you now can make with more confidence thanks to data? And
Hmm.
how do you distinguish between a trend and an anomaly when you look at your data?
Yeah. Well, for us, the business that we're in is highly dependent on weather. And so So that's one of the things I have to be very careful of is that one, I have to consider what might happen with the weather and consider what might not happen with the weather. And so I've got to throw that into the mix in addition to that. And so, gosh, I'm trying to think. One of the examples I know I would have made differently before had I had the data is that whenever we had a massive hailstorm that happened in 2021, um, the numbers just kept going up, 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 up for a significant amount of time. And so I actually doubled our staff. We had 25 staff members at the time, and we ended up with 53. So it was a little more than double of our staff that we had at the time during this when this hailstorm came through. And had I had the supply chain data of what suppliers were seeing in purchases, I would not have hired that many people. And so what ended up happening is I ended up laying off half of my staff, which just crushed me when the business fell off. But I wasn't watching it close enough to be able to see. So that staffing piece is massive to me now. And so now I watch it much closer so that I know when I hire somebody that that's a longer term position and that's not something that's just a blip. So, if just one busy week or one busy month, that's not a market shift. For me, I have to look at it's got to be more than 6 months of a shift because that helps. That gets through our weather patterns in our business. So I think each industry has to have their own kind of systems of what they're looking at, what the data shows you, but also, like you said, some of that qualitative stuff that you know what your cycles are in your data.
Yes, I think that's
Yeah.
a really good point that you're bringing up. And when I was in the semiconductor industry, one of the pieces of external data we looked at was cardboard box manufacturing. Because it,
Ah.
yes. So anyway, that's again a conversation for another time. But
Mm-hmm.
yes, that there are things you can look at that are relevant to your business, like
Mm-hmm.
your point, the weather that can and that you can look at and say, oh, was that a blip, to your point, or an anomaly, or is that really a pattern and a trend that we need to be thinking about and how it's going to impact our business.
Yeah,
So I can see.
a rolling 12 months of data can tell you a whole lot.
Yes, I agree with you. And that's a great tip, everybody.
Mm-hmm.
So I can see how important it is to take the right action at the right time. You know, that old saying, timing is everything.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a lot of people find it pretty difficult to justify investing in data initiatives. We have found that two key metrics, though, really help evaluate the ROI of data: time to insights and time to decisions. And by tracking how quickly an organization can transform raw data into an actionable insight, which time to insights, and then convert those insights into informed business decisions, time to decision, leaders like you and others that we work with can quantify the productivity and profitability gains from their data investments. So when you can accelerate both time to insights and time to decisions, then you can gain a competitive advantage, improve operational efficiency, maximize the value derived from data-driven strategies. So, Stacie, how do you measure the value of your customer data today? What
Mm-hmm.
metrics or business outcomes do you track to ensure your insights are driving results? And how do you connect your data efforts to tangible business value?
When I look at what I see, mainly what I'm looking at is really conversion rates and my
Mhm.
customer satisfaction. And I'm kind of taking the next step in my data process here, and I've just now started to dig into and start monitoring how fast people make the decision. Especially on replacements because it's a high ticket number, and so our CRM system actually tracks the days. I can track the days that everything stays in a status. And so I'm doing some analysis of that now to see how long a customer stays in a particular status before they make a decision. And then I'm taking that data and I'm going to be using that to host a focus group to actually find out from customers that did buy from and didn't buy from us, what were they looking at within those time frames, so that what can I do to help speed that up? Because
That's
the faster I can speed
great.
that up, the least chances I have of somebody else coming and taking that business from me.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Or like to your point earlier, they just, it sort of languishes on the vine and
Mhm.
then something else comes along and it may not, people only have so much money to go around, whether they're
Right.
in a business or for their household.
Right.
And if something else comes along and money that was allocated for one thing ends up being reallocated for
Yes.
something else. So
Yeah. And in a
uh,
perfect world, I'm going to be able to hopefully use some of that data and tie that in some also with interest rates. What's going on with interest rates? So then I can help
Yes.
predict what should I expect to see of customers that are financing. What should be the trend I should expect to see with that?
Great example. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So simply accumulating more data does not guarantee better business insights or outcomes. It's not about the quantity. It's really kind of about the quality. And throughout conversations our conversations together, you've mentioned that it's important for organizations to establish a disciplined process for data management. And I know you're a very disciplined person. We have that trait in common. I think it's a good trait, by the way. So you brought up a great point about the quality of data, its relevance, and the need for structured analysis to extract those actionable insights that help you make better strategic decisions. You mentioned that value comes not from volume, but from the systematic approach that transforms the right data into meaningful intelligence for business growth. So for leaders just starting their data journey, what advice would you offer? What are the biggest lessons you've learned about collecting, analyzing, and applying customer data? And for those that might be a little further along in the journey, what best practices or next level challenges should they anticipate?
Well, for someone just starting out, I'd say just kind of start small. Start with what you have and work on staying consistent. Don't get overwhelmed with it and start trying to pull too many data points. Especially if you're someone who, like me or like you, who I love data, it's easy for me to all of a sudden think, oh, I want to see that, and I want to see that, and I want to see that, and I want to see that. When in actuality, really, there's only a handful of ones that are going to make a huge difference in the decision that you're going to make. So make sure you focus on the ones that are important. And focus on the ones that helps you serve your customers and your staff better. That was understanding where leads for us, where leads are coming from. That's where we're looking at. You have a map each month that I take a look at and I go, okay, where are my customers coming from on that heat map so I can tell what area I'm serving, what customers are buying what products in what area. And so that helps us out a lot too. But the main thing too is use the data. A lot of people collect it and have it, but then they kind of get analysis paralysis whenever they start trying to use it. So you got to learn to use it, and you got to teach your staff how to use it, and teach your leaders how to use it and the importance of it. Because while I keep a lot of things close to the vest here, I've also got a great leadership team that I've started sharing how to review this data so they can start making some of those decisions and they can start seeing how we use it in their decisions that they're making further down.
Yeah, I think you bring up a couple of really valuable points. Focus on data that you will help you serve your customers better,
Hmm.
and remember to actually use the data. I think those are really
Yes.
important
Yes.
messages there. One of the biggest hurdles we see is that many organizations operate through what we call these random acts that I mentioned earlier. Those isolated efforts, they're not anchored to a clear data-driven strategy. Um, we're working with people and they ask us, well, there's so much data, what do we need to do? I start with suggesting, well, what kind of business decisions do you need to make, and what do you need to know to make them? That can help you get a little
Hmm.
focused, right, on what you
Yep.
need to look at. And so that to do that, stay focused, avoid those random acts, be
Hmm.
disciplined, have a process, be focused. So back to leaders just starting out, how do
Hmm.
you recommend, or what do you recommend they do to prevent random acts from creeping into their data and decision-making processes?
Well, I think the first thing you have to do is you have to recognize and you have to say random acts are going to happen. Okay.
Yeah.
And but how you respond to them is really and what I mean random acts for us again it's we're weather driven. So for other people in other industries it might be one large job or one large contract that might drop in their lap. It might be the loss of one large job or something like that that may happen that's outside of their control. But if it is going to happen, but that doesn't mean you respond to that immediately in a total shift of what's going to happen. We've done that a couple of times, and it has never proven well for us. We had a massive hailstorm I talk about in 2021, which we just shifted everything to, and ended up burning out things that and actually got caught um, with too many staff because we weren't paying attention to the data. So we do that by setting some goals and reviewing those goals on a regular basis. I'm rolling out a new plan now next year to where the initiatives that we're doing are actually going to be tied to specific data points. And so it's no longer about what we think is going to happen. It is what is actually happening. And if we need to pivot based on what the data is telling us and not just on gut feel.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. And I agree with
Mm-hmm.
you. That's a great piece of advice. So it's clear, to me, that you and your team have found actionable customer insights to be a pretty important and critical driver of business growth. It's enabled your organization to anticipate customer needs, to personalize your offerings, and to build stronger relationships. And I think we believe that by systematically collecting and analyzing customer data, you can see those patterns and preferences that can inform your strategy and foster innovation. Your story seems to bear that out, and you've leveraged customer insights. It's helped differentiate yourself in the marketplace, improve the value you bring to your customers, and accelerate your growth. How do you ensure that customer insights are systematically collected, analyzed, and translated into strategies that deliver measurable value and sustainable growth? I know you have the CRM system. I know you have a process for collecting, but how do you make sure that you have those insights that you need that are and measure their value and sustainable, enable sustainable growth and measurable value?
I look at that as my job. That is my job as the leader to make sure that I'm communicating with my staff and my leadership team the importance of it, and that I'm getting their buy-in on it, that they understand why it's needed, and I don't let them get away with not doing it. And sometimes it's providing the tools that they need to do that. For example, with our front desk ladies, I wanted to collect all this information, so we had a dynamic website built, an internal website built, where when a customer calls in, it's got everything that they need to say. And it's, if customer calls in and says, I'm calling about a roof repair, they click on roof repair and it gives them what they need to get for that roof repair. If they say replacement and they've got insurance involved, it gives them the questions on that. And they're entering that directly into the system so that we capture all of it. So that's how I do it. Is one, I make sure my leaders know how important it is, but two, also make sure they have the tools to be able to calculate it, not make it so difficult. In the early days, it was difficult to collect some of this information. Well, as technology's gotten better, it's gotten easier and easier.
Yeah, collecting the data is not the challenge. It's
No.
analyzing the data, determining those patterns, those trends, and coming, and the insights and acting on them. That's where we certainly, I think, are today.
Yep.
I know that you're all about a culture of continuous improvement, and culture is a really important part of every company's success. What's that saying? Culture eats strategy, or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about culture. One of our customers, and I think this is something I may have mentioned, in order to help build out a data-driven culture in their organization, started having their weekly staff meetings begin with some kind of customer insight from the data of the previous week. So they would start off with, here's what we've learned this week, kind of little thing. And it got everybody starting to talk about the data and what it might mean and what kind of decision they might make as a result. So I thought that was a kind of a fascinating way to build a data-driven culture.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it requires, as you said, you have to have tools, but it does take more than technology. It does take, to your point, leadership commitment, clear processes, and continuous investment in data literacy across the organization, getting your people aligned and your practices and your incentives so that people embrace the idea of data, right? And using data to make decisions, even in their job, and being able to say to you, I think we should do X, Y, and Z because the data says this. That's how you can foster more collaboration internally. And I know you encourage curiosity and you make the data accessible. So organizations, have to embed, a culture where insights drive performance, innovation, and long-term growth. What are the most important steps? Think about one or two steps that a leader can take to embed a truly data-driven mindset across the organization, ensuring that customer insights consistently inform strategy and innovation.
Well, I love the one you just came up with about starting the weekly meetings with data insights from last week. So I'm probably going to steal that one and use that one.
Let me know if I can help.
But one that I have that I've had to train myself to use, and I'm still working on it because it's a habit that you have to get yourself into, is when somebody brings you an idea they want to do. My leadership team comes to me and says, "Hey, we want to do this, or we think this is," to ask the question, show me where that says we should do that. Show me that data. Show me that, because in our industry there is a lot of gut feel. There is a lot of, well, I think there is a lot. That's just the nature of this industry. It's not very data driven, and so it takes me having to ask the question. Okay, I understand why you're saying that. I think I might agree with you, but can you show me where you got that information? It kind of goes back to that old school thing of show me your work. On your
Yes.
math test, show me your work. So it's kind of like, show me where the data shows that. And that's not me trying to be ugly. That's not me trying to not want to do their idea. It's just them knowing that when they come to me, I'm going to ask them to want to see where is it, why you're wanting me to spend this much to do this. Show me where you kind of got that idea based on data. And
Yes.
so that's a big one. And what happens, people just start to automatically start bringing it to you, and they bring you an idea because they know you're going to ask for it there. And so again, that's still a work in progress for me. I still have to push back on sometimes on show me where that's coming from, and I'll be happy to do it.
Yes, I
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah.
We're the same here, and
Mhm.
we're all about data. But
Mhm.
we still have people that come up with a great idea. And I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. I agree. That might be really something worth experimenting or trying.
Yeah.
What kind of data do you have to support that that might be something we want to invest in? I'm all
Yeah.
for experiments. I think that they're
Mhm.
really valuable, and we should try things,
Yeah.
and think outside the box. But it does add a level of confidence to
Mhm.
the decision if you have some data to support the
Well,
direction.
and I think also there's sometimes I will come up with an idea and then ask my leadership team, "Will you go get the data for this? Will you go? Here's what I think we should. I think here's an idea that I think will work. Can you go almost prove it, or disprove it, either one. But that way it kind of gets everybody looking at it from a data standpoint.
Yeah, that's a great suggestion. So
Mhm.
you're the president. How do you ensure that data accountability is part of the leadership to conversations, perhaps
Mhm.
even conversations in the boardroom, so that insight-driven decision making is really kind of a part of your organization's governance?
Mhm. That's what I'm still working on. Again, because I am a little bit of a control freak. Probably some wouldn't say a little bit; they probably would say a lot. So that is one area that I am continue to work on, um, to make sure again that our leadership team is on that same page. And so part of it is again by making my our goals something that we can just see a metric on. And so it's again not a feel. And that kind of what the standard that everybody is being held to is based on a data driven point. So I think that just has to continue as to part of the conversations that we're having and the agendas that are set for meetings. If the agenda is set for a meeting and it's data driven, it should have something that with the data there for it. And so that's something that I'm really going to focus a lot more on next year, is that all of our agendas, when we come to them, that they should have something attached to them that says, here's the data that supports what we're going to talk about in this agenda.
I think that's excellent.
Mhm.
So I really appreciate you sharing your story and the lessons you've learned from your journey, and highlighting, how moving from instinct to actionable insights has, fundamentally transformed how you make decisions. And through your real world experience, we can talk with our customers all day long about what would be good ideas, but I think it really always helps for them to hear what people are actually doing, the real world
Mhm.
experience. They can see the tangible impact of building a disciplined data process, and
Mhm.
why investing in data literacy, and why cultivating a culture where insights drive strategy, operations, and growth make a difference to a company's long-term sustainable growth. So our conversation underscores that business success kind of depends on embedding data-driven thinking into leadership. So before we close, is there any last things you would like to add?
I think we've covered most everything. I mean, it's just again the biggest thing is knowing your industry and getting the data that your industry needs and the specifics there. And there could be some things that you would have never thought of, but as the more you dig, you kind of go, oh wait, that actually I see when this happens that this happens. And so don't be afraid to look at some of those things that are that may be driving a behavior of your clients that you never thought of.
I think that's a great parting
Mhm.
advice. Thank you for being our guest. And I want to thank everyone who's a member of our community for listening in. Hope you found this episode of What's Your Edge helpful. Since 1999, Vision Edge Marketing has been helping our customers eliminate random acts, apply data, analytics, process, and measurement to accelerate growth, create customer value, and improve performance. We always welcome hearing from you.